Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Gottlieb. I'm a therapist, an author, and also, like you, a fellow traveler in the messy, beautiful, and sometimes confusing world of relationships. Let me ask you a question. How can two people love each other deeply, but still feel like something's missing? How can we share a life, a mortgage, a dog, kids, dinners, routines, and yet lose that electric spark that once made our hearts race? You know what I hear a lot in my therapy office? I love them, but I'm not sure I'm still in love. Or I miss wanting them. And here's the truth. No one talks about enough. Love and desire are not the same thing. Love is comfort. Desire is mystery. We crave connection, but we also crave space. We want to feel safe, but we want adventure too. And long-term relationships, they often prioritize the safety part, but slowly erase the mystery that fuels desire. Think about it. In the beginning of a relationship, everything is new. You're curious, you pay attention, you listen differently. There's uncertainty, and in that space of not knowing, desire grows. But over time, we replace curiosity with assumptions. We stop asking questions because we think we already know the answers. One of my clients, let's call her Rachel, came in and said, I just want him again. He hasn't changed, but maybe I have. And you know what? She was right. Desire doesn't just live in the other person, it lives in how we see them and how we see ourselves. We lose desire when we lose the parts of ourselves that felt alive, curious, and open. We lose desire when we stop showing up, not just for the other person, but for our own emotional aliveness. So, what's the secret? The secret to desire in a long-term relationship isn't about finding the right person. It's about being the right version of yourself within that relationship. It's about becoming strangers again, in small ways, asking new questions, taking time apart to come back with something to share, letting go of the need for everything to feel predictable, and allowing for surprise. Desire needs space to breathe. It thrives in the unknown. And ironically, the more we try to hold on tightly, the faster it slips away. So if you want to rekindle desire, get curious. Be brave enough to not know your partner completely, and even braver to rediscover yourself. Because in the end, long-term desire isn't about fireworks. It's about lighting little matches over and over again and never letting the flame go out. People come into my therapy office all the time thinking there's something wrong with them because the passion in the relationship has faded. They sit across from me, sometimes holding back tears, sometimes numb, and they say things like, I love them, I really do, but I'm just not feeling it anymore. And what they mean by it is desire, the butterflies, the anticipation, the longing, the physical spark that used to feel automatic. Now, instead, it feels like they're roommates, loving, caring, functional. But where did the fire go? And here's where I usually pause, lean in, and say something that surprises them. That's normal. Because somewhere along the way, we started confusing love with desire, as if they were the same thing, as if the presence of one guaranteed the other. But they're not. In fact, they often speak different emotional languages. Love is what makes you pick up the dry cleaning. It's texting your partner when they're having a hard day just to say, I'm thinking about you. It's the way you wrap the blanket around them when they've fallen asleep on the couch. Love is built through the mundane, through showing up again and again, not just when things are exciting, but especially when they're not. So, if you are struggling, whether or not desire, on the other hand, doesn't live in that same neighborhood. Desire is less about comfort and more about mystery. It thrives in the unknown, in the space between two people, not the closeness, but the distance. It's sparked by novelty, by curiosity, by the feeling that there's still something new to learn, to explore, to feel. And that's where the tension lies. Because love wants to know, to close the distance, to merge, to create predictability. But desire, it wants to wonder. It wants room to breathe. It needs just enough distance to maintain curiosity. Think about the beginning of a relationship.
Nearly indestructible.
Everything is electric, not because you've figured the other person out, but because you haven't. You lean in closer because you're drawn to what's still unknown. And you watch how they move, how they laugh, how they see the world. You're present. You're awake.
Oh, yeah, that's
But fast forward a few years, and what once felt mysterious becomes routine. The thing that once thrilled you now blends into the background of everyday life. And still, that's not failure. That's human nature. That's what happens when love takes root. But if we're not careful, we can start to believe that the absence of desire means the relationship is broken. That maybe we chose wrong, that maybe we're broken. But the truth is, what we're experiencing is not the end, it's a transition, a shift from the natural highs of new love to the deeper, more sustaining rhythms of long-term intimacy. And with that shift comes a challenge. How do we stay connected and stay curious? Some people panic and try to chase the high somewhere else. Others bury their longing and settle into quiet dissatisfaction. But there's a third way. And it starts with understanding that love and desire aren't at odds. They're just different muscles. Love holds the relationship together. Desire reminds us we're alive inside of it. So when someone tells me they love their partner but don't feel desire anymore, I don't hear failure. I hear an invitation to reconnect with the part of themselves that still longs, that still dreams, that still wants to feel chosen, seen, wanted, not just as a partner, but as a person. Because it's not about loving less. It's about learning to desire again in the middle of everything we already know. And that's a different kind of passion. One that grows not in the heat of the beginning, but in the brave, intentional space we create between love and mystery. I had a couple once, married almost 10 years, who came in for therapy because, in their words, they felt stuck. Not unhappy exactly, not angry, just flat. They weren't fighting, they still loved each other, but everything felt muted, predictable. He knew exactly what she was going to order at dinner. She could finish his sentences before he even opened his mouth. Their conversations were filled with logistics, school drop-offs, groceries, work stress. But the sense of wonder inspired me. When the sense of wonder, the spark, it had quietly vanished. She said to me, "I miss how we used to stay up all night talking about everything and nothing." And he said, "We just don't have anything new to say anymore." This is what happens when we start mistaking knowing someone with fully knowing them. We build a life with another person, and slowly we create this illusion that we've seen all their corners. We've mapped out the terrain, we've read the whole book. But the truth is, we've maybe read the first few chapters over and over and assumed we've understood the whole story.
That's a replica of the house.
In the beginning of a relationship, there's so much we don't know. And that not knowing, that's what makes us lean in. It's what makes us ask questions, listen deeply, pay attention. You want to know how they take their coffee? Sure. But more than that, you want to know what breaks their heart, what makes them light up, what keeps them up at night. You're engaged, present. You don't take anything for granted. But over time, routine replaces curiosity. We stop asking how their day really was because we think we already know. We assume we understand their patterns, their moods, their reactions. So we stop being surprised. and we stop looking. That familiarity, the kind that makes life feel safe and stable,
Oh yeah, that's
also
a replica
becomes
of
the
the
thing that
house.
slowly
My
erodes the
husband's father built
edge
that in 1952.
that desire and deep
Nearly
connection live
indestructible.
on. Because people aren't static. We're always evolving, quietly, internally. Even if the surface looks the same, underneath there are always new questions to ask, new stories to uncover. But we have to be willing to look again, to not assume, to wonder, even when it feels like we already know. I remember once asking a woman in a session, "What's something your husband doesn't know about you?" And she paused, then laughed and said, "We've been married 25 years. He knows everything." But then she thought for a second longer and said, "Actually, he doesn't know that I started journaling again recently. He doesn't know that sometimes I cry when I'm folding laundry, or that I fantasize about quitting my job and opening a bakery." There it was, a whole world he hadn't seen, not because she was hiding, but because he'd stopped looking. And maybe she had too. When we stop being curious about our partners, it's usually because we've also stopped being curious about ourselves. We fall into roles, the mom, the husband, the provider, the fixer. And slowly, the more complex parts of who we are get pushed aside. And when we can't access that inner richness in ourselves, it becomes harder to see it in someone else. But connection is built through curiosity, through the questions that don't have obvious answers, through the space we create when we're willing to say, "I might not know you as well as I think I do. Tell me again." That couple I mentioned, they started asking each other new questions again. They went for walks without their phones. They talked about fears they hadn't voiced in years. They realized there was so much they hadn't seen, not because it wasn't there, but because they'd stopped looking. And that's the quiet risk of familiarity. Not that we grow apart, but that we stop remembering how endlessly discoverable another person and ourselves can be. It's funny how often people come into therapy wanting to fix something in their relationship. And what we end up working on is their relationship with themselves. They'll say, "I just don't feel attracted to my partner anymore." Or, "They don't look at me the way they used to." Or, "I miss how I used to feel around them." Or, "I miss the same things that I used to feel around them." Or, "I miss the same things that I used to feel around them." And what we start to uncover is that it's not always about the other person at all. Sometimes what they're really missing is themselves, the version of themselves they used to be when things felt alive. I remember this one woman, a mother of 3, married 15 years, who sat on my couch and told me, "I used to be fun. I used to feel sexy. Now I just feel invisible, not just to him, but to me. And now I feel me." Then she said, "Just feels me." And I knew exactly what she meant. It wasn't that her partner had stopped desiring her. It's that she no longer saw herself as someone desirable. Somewhere between the daycare pickups and the meetings and the dinner dishes, the part of her that once felt vibrant, curious, sensual, it had gone quiet. Not dead, just quiet. That's the part no one really talks about when we talk about long-term relationships and desire. We focus so much on what's happening between two people, the chemistry, the communication, the routine, that we forget how much of desire lives in the space inside of us, the way we see ourselves, the way we feel in our own skin, the way we access or lose touch with the parts of ourselves that feel alive and worth noticing. Because here's the thing. Desire doesn't just come from someone looking at you with want in their eyes. It comes from you feeling like someone who is worth wanting. It comes from feeling engaged with your life, lit up by something, anything, that reminds you of who you are outside of your roles. When you feel numb inside, It's hard to generate heat with another person. It's hard to be present in intimacy when you don't feel present in yourself. And it's especially hard to feel desirable when your inner voice has become critical, tired, or absent altogether. One man told me, I used to look at my wife and feel this jolt, like I couldn't believe she was mine. Now, I just feel flat. But when we dug deeper, what became clear was that he had changed. He was burned out, disconnected from his own passions, resentful of how small his world had become. And when he started to reconnect with himself, taking care of his body, pursuing something creative again, setting boundaries, something shifted. And then I think that what we did for them said they were successful. Because what we did for them said they were successful. And then buried beneath that was this sense of his eyes lit up again. And suddenly his desire for his wife returned. Not because she had changed, but because he had. Desire asks for more than just proximity. It asks for presence. And that presence starts with being in touch with who you are, not just as a partner or parent or professional, but as a person with your own inner world. When we lose that connection to ourselves, we become strangers to the people we love. We can be in the same room, even the same bed, and still feel miles apart. So when people say, I want to want them again, sometimes what they really mean is, I want to find myself again. And that's where the work begins. Not in fixing the other person, not in blaming or chasing or performing, but in slowly, gently turning back toward the version of you that still dreams, still aches, still remembers what it feels like to be fully awake in your own life. Because when you feel that again, the desire follows. Not as a performance, not as an obligation, but as something real, something remembered. One of the hardest truths for people in long-term relationships to accept is that sometimes the very closeness we've worked so hard to build is the thing that quietly erodes desire. Not love. Love can grow deeper with closeness. But desire, that's a different creature. It doesn't thrive in constant proximity. It needs space. And that can feel confusing, even threatening, especially when we're told over and over again that true intimacy means being completely intertwined, doing everything together, knowing every thought the other person has before they even speak it out loud. I had a couple in therapy, both kind, devoted, thoughtful people. They spent almost all their time together. Work, family, friends, even their hobbies overlapped. They were inseparable, but something was missing. He said, I love her, but it's like we're just blending into each other. She nodded and said, I don't remember the last time I missed him. How could I? He's always right here. It was such a tender moment because what they were describing wasn't a failure. It was actually a success. They had built safety, routine, reliability, all the things we're told are the cornerstones of a good relationship. But what no one tells you is that those things can also make it hard to feel the pull of desire. Not because desire disappears, but because it needs something that closeness alone can't provide. Separation. Desire is born in the space between, in the moments when you're apart and your imagination fills in the gaps. It's in the little mysteries, the things you don't fully know about each other, the way someone's absence can make you remember what you miss about their presence, and the mysteries of the ways that people seek us out and in, the ways in which they make you remember what you miss about their presence. When someone is absent can make you remember what you miss about their presence. When someone is absent can make you remember what you miss about their presence. You don't long for what's always available. You long for what you can't quite touch. But so many couples interpret that space as distance, as something dangerous. They believe that if they aren't doing everything together, it must mean something is wrong. They start to feel anxious when one partner wants alone time or takes a trip or simply becomes a little more quiet and inward. We live in a culture that treats closeness as the only indicator of health. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do in a relationship is step back, even slightly, and give each other room to breathe. I once asked a woman in session, "When was the last time you missed your partner?" She looked at me and said, "I honestly don't know. Maybe when he went out of town for work?" But even then, we were texting constantly. And then she laughed, a little sadly, and added, "I think I miss missing him." There was a time, in the beginning, when she'd wait to hear the door open, when a text from him would light up her day, when they still had stories to tell each other because they'd spent hours apart. But now, life had become so enmeshed that there were no gaps left to fill. Space isn't about abandonment. It's not about coldness or withdrawal. It's about respect. For your own inner world and for your partners. It's about trusting that the relationship is strong enough to hold a little distance, a little quiet, a little time where you're each tending to your own spark. Because when you come back from that space, when you return from a solo walk or a trip, or even just a few hours of doing something that lights you up as an individual, you return with something new to offer. A story, a fresh energy, a part of yourself that isn't just the partner, the parent, the co-pilot in daily logistics. It's the person with a story who's willing to listen when you finally listen and take an inventory of the people around you. You return with something new to offer. A story, a fresh energy, a part of yourself that isn't just the partner that likely isn't just the partner that likely isn't just the partner. You return as you, and that's where desire lives, in seeing the other person as someone who is still a little bit unknown, someone who isn't just yours, but also their own, someone you can still be curious about, and maybe, even more importantly, someone who reminds you of who you are when you're not just part of a pair, but a whole person, coming back with something real to give. What most people don't realize is that even in the healthiest relationships, even in the ones built on deep love and respect, the real work doesn't stop after the vows or the move-in date or the first shared holiday. It doesn't even stop once you've raised kids or built a life together. That's actually where the work begins. Because the people you fell in love with aren't frozen in time, they're changing. You're changing. And the relationship has to keep changing too. But instead of rediscovering each other over and over again, so many couples start relying on the versions of each other that existed 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even just last year. And they miss what's unfolding right in front of them. Right? So when the couples are engaged in freedom, remember this couple, late 40s, married 20 years, who came in because, as the wife put it, it's like we're in a polite partnership. We get along, but the emotional charge just isn't there anymore. The husband nodded and added, "We know everything about each other. There's nothing left to talk about." So I asked them, "When was the last time you asked each other something new?" They stared at me for a moment. "Like what?" the wife asked. "Anything," I said. A real question. Not, "Did you feed the dog?" or "What time is your meeting?" Something you don't already know the answer to. Because here's the thing. Curiosity is connection. The moment you stop wondering about each other is the moment the space between you starts to go quiet. And that's not because there's nothing left to learn. It's because you've stopped looking. You've stopped treating each other like the complex, growing, mysterious people you both still are. Rediscovering each other isn't about planning a big trip or reinventing the relationship overnight. It's about the smaller daily choices to notice, to stay awake, to remain interested. It's asking, what's been on your mind lately? It's saying, tell me something you've never told me. It's watching the way they talk about something new and thinking, wow, I've never seen that part of you before. And it's also noticing how much you have changed. Sometimes we don't offer anything new to our partner not because they're not paying attention, but because we haven't nurtured anything new in ourselves to share. We've stopped reading, dreaming, trying. We've defaulted to autopilot. Not just in the relationship, but in our lives. Desire and connection feed off vitality, and vitality doesn't come from routine. It comes from movement, from change, from risk. That's what people forget. Love is safe, yes, but it can also be brave. Love is comfortable, but it doesn't have to be stagnant. I had another client, a man in his 50s, tell me one day, I started watching documentaries again. I used to love that stuff in college. Now I come home and tell her about what I learned. And suddenly we're talking for hours. It feels like we're dating again. And that's exactly it. He brought something alive back into the space between them, something unexpected, and it woke them both up. The spark that people think has died often hasn't gone anywhere. It's just buried under years of unspoken assumptions and quiet resignation. But when you make the choice to see your partner with fresh eyes, to treat them like someone worth getting to know again, it does something subtle but powerful. It reminds them that they're still interesting. And it reminds you that there's still more story to unfold. Because no matter how long you've been together, you haven't met every version of each other yet. And if you're willing to stay curious, to keep rediscovering each other, you'll fall in love more than once. Not with different people, but with the same person, over and over again,